Hi, my name is Earl Harden, and I work here at the Betty and Leonard Phillips Deaf Action Center in Shreveport, Louisiana. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me today as I talk about a topic that may be of great interest to you. That is, the advantages that can be had from hiring and working with deaf employees. Now, it's possible that you may not have given this much thought before this video, or maybe you're one of the many who wonder why such a topic is even necessary to discuss. Well, there's actually good reason to talk about the deaf and hard of hearing community in a positive light. And that reason is that it's just something that's not done very often. Many people view those who don't hear as well as they do as inferior, deficient, or even mentally incapable of accomplishing the tasks associated with many occupations. Worse yet, they feel that hiring such an individual would lead to a drop in productivity and provide a hardship not only for themselves, but also their businesses. There are still others who view the prospect of trying to communicate with people in anything other than the language that is commonly spoken or written in their locality as a daunting one. They feel that it really isn't worth their time, or it's too much of a hassle for the workplace. In other words, it would be too challenging for coworkers, supervisors, and any other customers they might encounter. Of course, money is also involved. There are a number of employers and businesses who are commendably aware that the ADA, that is the American with Disabilities Act, directs that those with disabilities who are employed must have reasonable accommodations made so that they can suitably accomplish their jobs. And yes, many of these employers are aware that these accommodations, whether it be an interpreter provided for a meeting or so forth, audio or video equipment to help enable the deaf or hard of hearing one to communicate at his job, these things come with a cost. Unfortunately, however, some of those who are in a position to provide such accommodations simply aren't willing to. They'd rather prefer to spend their time and money elsewhere, simply selecting a hearing person for the available position and avoiding, as they feel, the hassle. Now, those are just three of the reasons why we need to have this discussion. That is, underestimating the abilities of the deaf, unwillingness to learn how to communicate with them, and third, reluctance to shoulder the cost of accommodating a deaf employee. It's truly unfortunate that this situation persists in our time. And it's even sadder that many of these opinions and misconceptions continue to be perpetuated. It's the purpose of this video to give viewers a different perspective of hiring and working with deaf and hard of hearing individuals. Hopefully, we'll clear up some of those misconceptions and lead to a more open-minded approach that just might benefit you, your workplace, and of course, the deaf and hard of hearing people who gain employment as a result. So now let's get to the main point of this video. That is the advantages of hiring deaf employees. Number one, many deaf people are very hard workers, and that is contrary to popular belief. As we mentioned before, the negative view of the deaf community as a whole has led to many of its members going unemployed for months or even years, though not for lack of effort on their part. Discrimination against the deaf and hard of hearing is so widespread that at times the very mention of their hearing loss is enough to have their applications filed separately from the others. But despite this challenge, many deaf people continue to persevere in their search for a job until they find employment. And after they do, the relief and appreciation from getting a job moves them to work diligently to keep it. You understand, for so many of them, they've been told no so often. For example, well, no, I don't think you qualify for this position. No, I don't think you can handle these tasks adequately. You need to be able to hear to do it. No, I don't think this position is the right fit for you. It's just no over and over again. So imagine when they finally get a chance to hear yes, the sense of self-worth and accomplishment that they feel. It's almost refreshing, and it results in a motivated, loyal, and determined employee who will do whatever he or she can to prove that the only thing that they can't do is hear. Workers of that caliber are an asset to any work environment. Reason number two, deaf people tend to be very focused on the task at hand. They're not very easily distracted. Now, though many people might consider hearing loss to be a weakness, most deaf people consider it to be one of their assets, especially when it comes to remaining focused and undisturbed. After all, in many places of employment, there are any number of distractions. Ringing phones, humming office equipment, clicking keyboards, the roar of machinery, the general din of people coming and going, simultaneous conversations being held in the same space, mobile device sounds, and even outdoor traffic noise. For those of us who can hear, any one of these noises or a combination of them can make for a very effective distraction. Work that should only take a few minutes drags on longer and longer with each break in our work to see the reason behind the latest alarm, or as our thought process suffers as our minds drift to nearby conversations. Yet many deaf people will be quick to point out that these noises usually don't affect them much, if at all, depending on the severity of their hearing loss. So because of this, they generally remain focused on whatever tasks they've been given, because audible distractions remain at a minimum. In some cases, it's even necessary for a coworker or supervisor to approach them and kindly remind them of break times or other important news, because they become so engrossed in their work. Now, many a manager would like to have a staff full of such focused, undistracted employees. Reason number 3. Deaf and hard of hearing people tend to be more observant and visually attuned than most. Now, whereas the previous point that we discussed about not hearing a lot of the on-the-job noises might be by some spun as the exact reason why a business should not hire deaf or hard of hearing people, well, how can they hear the phone? How do they know when someone comes in? How am I supposed to get his attention? Well, that's how many people think. But what many of us hearing folks don't take into account is how many deaf and hard of hearing individuals compensate for their hearing loss with their sight. It actually surprises many people to know that deaf people in general are safer drivers than their hearing counterparts. Well, that's when they refrain from texting and conversing while driving, that is. But why is it that they can be said to be generally safer? It's because they rely on their sight to keep an eye on traffic patterns, watch for sudden movements, observe traffic signals, flashing emergency or law enforcement lights. They keep an eye on the rearview mirror and even the mannerisms and facial expressions of their fellow drivers. Now, you might be thinking, well, I do that too. Well, whereas we tend to be slightly less dependent on our sight when we're driving because we have audible cues about our surroundings. We have horns, sirens, screeching tires, maybe even people yelling. We have the traffic report on the radio. We know more about our environment because of what we can hear. And yet we still find ways to become more distracted with radios, cell phones, and other sounds. Deaf drivers, on the other hand, are generally more observant simply because it's a safety hazard for them. They have to pay careful attention to what they see. It's a necessity. Well, that same principle of careful observation carries over into the workplace. Deaf and hard of hearing employees pay far more attention to facial expressions and the body language of coworkers to try to get a sense of what is going on and how others around them feel. They try to get the emotions behind what is being said. They also observe the lips of others who are speaking in an attempt to grasp some of the words being formed, though this is by no means a skill possessed by the majority of deaf people. They also check their surroundings often, making a visual checklist of where objects, people, exits, and other necessary equipment and tools are located. Also, this heightened sense of observation makes training deaf employees less of the hassle that some misinformed individuals have thought it to be. You know, if someone carefully shows a deaf individual how to accomplish a certain task, where to put certain items, or even demonstrate a sequence of steps for a particular procedure, perhaps repeating it a time or two before allowing the deaf individual a chance to try it for themselves. You know, in many cases, with proper communication, such as with an interpreter there, those couple of steps and that repeating of it once or twice is sufficient for retention. Careful observation on the part of those with hearing loss assists them in learning quickly to do their jobs and acquiring new skills. Now, these are just 3 of the possibly surprising advantages that having deaf or hard of hearing people on your staff might bring. Now, there are a couple of others that you may also want to give careful thought to when considering how to fill an opening in your business. For instance, number 4 could be a possible tax credit. There are some small businesses that can, when employing individuals with disabilities, which would include deaf and hard of hearing people, it's possible that they could receive a tax credit from the government. One such incentive is through the Work Opportunity Tax Credit Program, which is offered through the U.S. Department of Labor. When an employer fills a vacant position with a WOTC certified employee, the employer can become qualified to claim a federal income tax credit for a portion of the new employee's salary. Another reason, number 5, they attract the attention of other deaf and hard of hearing patrons. The deaf community in many cities is very close-knit. So when one member is hired by a particular business, whether it be particularly a retail outlet like a store, a restaurant, or so forth, where goods are offered to other members of the community, you can rest assured that other members of the deaf community will find out about their employment in short order. And in time, they're going to begin to patronize that particular business, not only because one of their friends or family members works there, but that is an important part of it because they now have a familiar face, but they are also more than happy to give back to a business that supports their community. Now, those are just 5 reasons. There are many others that we could discuss, but time doesn't allow on this particular video. I didn't even mention federal requirements for equal access and diversity, or how you might even learn a great deal about deaf culture and maybe even sign language. But still, in just the few minutes that we've been together, we've discussed why employers should consider hiring deaf people. Hopefully, we've cleared up some of the misconceptions that you may have had and open your mind just a little bit more when it comes to diversity in the workplace. So please, by no means let this video be the end of your exploration. Let it be the beginning. You're sure to broaden your horizons even further if you do. And again, thank you for your time and attention to this presentation.